Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Forever West Old Time Radio Hour. I am Doss Boot, and as always, I am joined with my pal James Townsend, who's having a little bit of microphone issues. James, you want to talk and see if everyone else can hear you okay?
Yeah. Am I coming through, everyone? Just leaving a comment in the live chat. And this isn't a gratuitous attempt to get comments, by the way. Just let me know if you can hear me, if I'm coming through all right, as usual, if it sounds good. If it's to Doss, it sounds like I'm coming in real low.
With the headphones in and my mic and everything's good on my side. I just, as soon as we went live and you and I started talking, I just couldn't hear him very well. So we want to make sure everyone can hear him, and if not, we'll try to figure it out and we'll punch through it either way.
John says loud and clear.
Okay. Well, it could be something on my phone. Maybe there's some kind of pathway that's weird, and I don't know, but I can hear myself pretty well, and you're clear when you talk. The volume is just really low.
Is it the phone volume? Does the headphone volume for your output voice and then the phone volume differ?
No, the phone volume on my phone has nothing to do with the headphones because it's controlled by the mic.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and my phone volume is up either way, but it doesn't matter.
Well, celebrate all good.
Yeah. Okay, as long as everyone can hear, that's good. Okay, so I know because we have a week in between times, we can quickly recap, but we will definitely be finishing up today with our No Casket Long Enough, the Death of Pat Garrett series. I hope everyone has enjoyed the first two episodes. I have enjoyed it very much, meeting with you guys once again to discuss the death of one of the most famous lawmen of all time. Possibly. You got Wyatt Earp in there, of course. We can't forget Earp. A lot of people say they don't belong on the same plane, but I kind of disagree with that.
Yeah, I would too. I would disagree too.
Yeah, Pat's got quite a good, decent law career behind him, other than, everything with Billy. Okay, so last week we covered the death. We covered the all the actions that took place right after, going back into Las Cruces, bringing Sheriff Lucero back out with the coroner's jury, the testimonies, Dr. William C. Fields' autopsy report, what he found with the gunshot wounds. We heard some great analysis from David G. Thomas about a lot of these issues. And last week when we ended last week, Apollonia Garrett had just sold the home ranch to W.W. Cox, and that was in the El Paso Herald on December 15th, 1908. She used the money from the purchase of the home ranch, the selling of the home ranch, and she bought a 2-room adobe house in Las Cruces for $550. Okay. All right. Now, Wayne Brazel's trial, originally scheduled for October 1908. It's going to be rescheduled all the way until May 3rd of 1909, 14 months after Pat's death, which I feel, of course, that happens every trial in the United States now, it seems like. But back then, I wonder if that was normal. I feel like it wasn't. I don't know what ended up postponing it for so long, but yeah, I feel like in the Old West, having to... Some people could have died, witnesses. They could have taken off to another territory. They could have been arrested, anything. Got tuberculosis. But, it was 14 months later. So I kind of wondered.
Didn't Carl Adamson get arrested for the Chinese immigrant problem?
Right. But
in the meantime?
Yes. But David G. Thomas does point out that in his book, and I'm paraphrasing, but he points out how most historians before that will just say, well, that's why Carl Adamson did not testify at the trial, right? Because he was arrested for the Chinese immigration smuggling. However, he was out on bond, and we did cover that.
Yeah.
Him and that guy appealed it. They got like 30 years or something hard labor, and then they appealed it, paid their bond, and I don't know what happened to him after that.
Probably wouldn't have been a problem at all to get him to testify if they needed him.
No, and we'll cover some stuff with the trial, that will make sense as to why I kind of feel like, if they could have, they probably would have, you know what I mean? If it was too much of, if it wasn't too much of an issue, of course, he's the one witness, right? But we'll find out, I think, why they went ahead with just not having him come back for the trial. But David did point out he was on bond. Yeah. And David's got all the documentation on there that, he paid his bond and they released him. So,
right.
A lot of that shit was really weird and just odd on the surface. And you get deeper and it debunks a little bit here and there, but it's hard to not pay attention to all these names that are connected throughout all of this, right?
Yeah,
there's just so many names, and you kind of start to wonder, okay, I see why the conspiracy theories have remained for so long, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and of course, James Killer Miller, Deacon Jim Miller, he is going to be lynched in Ada, Oklahoma, April 19th, 1909. I figure everyone has seen that photo. I didn't send you that photo of him hanging in the barn.
Right.
If you want to see him, Jim Miller hanging by his neck in a barn, it's a pretty easy photo to find.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. Okay. So one of the major things that we have to deal with is no trial transcript, just like Billy's trial. However, you and I a year ago one of us, I can't remember who, but one of us did a post in Legends about that specific thing, that it was a territorial law at the time in 1881 and in 1908. So Billy's trial and Brazel's trial, that they did not make a copy of the transcript unless there was an appeal.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And we found that out. I can't remember if you did that or I did or somebody else did, but I remember reading that and going, holy man, that makes so much sense. Everyone goes, oh, of course, because it's a conspiracy and they lost it and they don't want you to know what happened and all this other crap. It's like, no, there was no appeal. Saver.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually in the New Mexico territorial law. Yeah. So the same thing with Brazel's trial. There's no appeal. So there's no trial transcript, but we know everything as far as, testified and who didn't testify. And so we went over that last week. So Carl Adamson's name is on the list, but then it's crossed off. Okay. For whatever reason. But so he was supposed to be, he was originally supposed to be subpoenaed to come back for the trial in 1909. And a lot of this information from Brazel's trial does come from New Mexico versus Wayne Brazel, case number 4112, Don Ana County District Court records filed October 7th, 1908. Okay, so a lot of information, it comes from that. We talked about how they subpoenaed the Western Union Telegraph Company for all copies of the telegrams received by and to Brazel, Adamson, Miller, Cox, and Garrett during January, February, and March of 1908. And of course, they found nothing that would suggest a conspiracy. So in the trial, you've got Dr. Field, Sheriff Lucero, Cesario Petragon, and Fay Sperry for the prosecution. Wayne Brazel, mounted policeman John Beal, James Baird, and Jeff Ake testified for the defense. Now, John Beal had earlier been assigned to investigate the goat feud between Garrett and Brazel, that statute, right? He was investigating that, and it was still open. That was one of the reasons why he was brought to testify. James Baird was a close friend of Brazel's, but the other guy that testified, Jeff Ake, he was reportedly friends with both Garrett and Brazel. Okay. El Paso Herald, May 5th, 1909 reports. Attorneys Holt and Fall made brief arguments to the jury for the defense, after which the district attorney closed for the prosecution. It took about 15 minutes for the court to deliver the charge. The case went to the jury at 5:20 p.m. 15 minutes later, the jury returned with a verdict of not guilty on the grounds of self-defense.
Man.
Okay, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And again, that has once again, I understand it's another detail that's going to fuel the conspiracy, right? Why only 15 minutes? Okay, so we don't know what Brazel testified. We don't know what he said, but clearly he would have had to prove that he was in, obvious fear for his life,
Yeah.
So Garrett's threat, well, if I can't get you off, there, I'll get you off now, right? Or, whatever he says. So the threat, okay? And maybe John Beale, because we don't know, but he testifies, and he testifies for the defense. So, and maybe John Beale, from his investigation, maybe he got that impression that maybe Garrett wanted to hurt Brazel. I'm not sure. But yeah, because Brazel Beale was sent into New Mexico by Governor Curry on the day Garrett was killed because his investigation to the goat feud was still open. So I don't know this, but maybe John Beale in his testimony could have stated that the Garrett Brazel feud was either worse or, maybe it was exaggerated as far as how bad the feud was. I don't know. Like, I'm just speculating because we don't have the trials transcript, I just know that he testified for the defense. So, who knows? But I think obviously Brazel responding to Garrett's threat and Garrett then reaching for the shotgun, I guess that would imply imminent threat on his life. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I would interpret it the same way.
Right. I mean, they don't really, they've got Adamson's testimony 5 times. Okay, that needs to be said. So if there's a reason why Carl Adamson doesn't come back, if they cross his name off, they don't want to bother getting the bond or whatever the case may be, because he was out on bond. If they don't want to mess with it, fine. But either way, so he gives his testimony immediately after, right, when they ride back out. He gives his testimony to George Curry in his hotel room on March 4th, and then later that day under oath at the preliminary examination. Then James Hervey, right, New Mexico District Attorney, he's going to take Dr. Field and Adamson back out there, right? So he does that the 4th time, and then he returns in April 13th, 1908, and testifies for the grand jury. 5 times, twice under oath.
And Hervey took him out there to try and get him to mess his story up. So
I believe you. I believe you're onto something there. They were very concerned. Why did they take him back out there a second time? 4 days, 5 days after the killing, but after he gives the examination, clearly Hervey had a problem with it because he's like, well, we're going out there right now.
So so at least one time that Adamson gave his testimony was under the supervision of a guy who was trying to find fault with it. And ultimately did not.
Yeah, sounds like. And Hervey did his duty. He did his job. He covered all the ground and the details. And as far as I'm concerned, they really did investigate it. They
Absolutely,
really did. They didn't ignore anything.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. So, he's found not guilty. Okay. Now, let's talk about this. What about the claim that Garrett's trousers were unbuttoned?
What about that claim?
Check this out.
That's a big thing.
During all legal proceedings, all of them, the issue is never addressed. David G. Thomas commented, unless we are to believe there was utter incompetence on the part of the press and the legal authorities, or a huge conspiracy involving all of the press and the legal establishment, there must have been an explanation for the condition of Garrett's trousers that satisfied the jurors. One possibility is that the report of Garrett's trousers being unbuttoned was a misdescription. Dr. Field, in reporting on his view of Garrett's body that day, says his clothes were open and disarranged, which is far more ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
David G. Thomas stated, the only true mystery to Garrett's death were his trousers unbuttoned when he was shot, which would indicate he was shot in the back of the head while urinating. which is alleged in one newspaper article the day after the murder, which most likely came from Fields' statement. That part, I feel like I said that. The Field statement, they go out there the same day. Following day, March 1st, it's in the newspaper article. And it's only in that newspaper article.
So is it possible that Dr. Fields said his clothing was in disarray, and then that newspaper article, the writer of that article was like, oh, clearly his trousers were undone. And that was the origin of the open trousers theory.
I think that's a very good possibility. I don't have, other than, a misconception, a misprint, or just the way it's stated and the way it was typed. I mean, there's always that, that veil between who's reporting it to the writer and then who's going to write the article, I guess. I'm not sure, but there is nothing else that says anything about the trousers.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was mentioning, David's comment that unless we are to believe of all of this utter incompetence, which there wasn't, why wasn't even brought up in the trial? Not at all. Carl Adamson never mentioned it in his testimony, his eyewitness testimony. He never said anything about it. He never once said that Garrett got out to urinate. He said he was urinating and Garrett took the reins as the buggy was stopping.
Yeah.
And Brazel and, Garrett were arguing the whole time.
So maybe the racket he heard was Garrett unfastening his trousers and getting ready to pee on Brazel.
Right. We talked about that last week, right? That obviously what was the racket that everyone agreed that Adamson heard? It was Garrett climbing out of the buggy.
Yeah.
And then, he reaches for the shotgun.
Here's something else I think that I think it's in Adamson's testimony, at least the first one he gives to Lucero, he says that we did not know, something like we did not know that he had a 6-shooter in his waistband.
Yes, because he didn't have a holster. Effect.
Yeah, so that, to me, that says that Adamson, that's a part of his narrative. That's a part of his internal explanation as to why things went down the way they did. And so if you've got Brazel riding up with a Winchester rifle in its scabbard on the saddle, and that's the only threat that Garrett is cognizant of, he jumps down. That's why he turns his back to Wayne, because one of the biggest objections by the friends of Garrett was that it has to be a conspiracy because Garrett would never turn his back on a threat. But Garrett thinks that Brazel only has that Winchester. So he thinks he has plenty of time to turn and grab that shotgun and do what he needs to do to get it ready to fire.
Sure.
He doesn't know that all Wayne has to do is reach right into that waistband and pull that revolver out.
Yeah, and he testified at the beginning when they first saw Brazel, he just had the Winchester. He didn't have a holster or nothing like that. Yeah, it was just tucked in the waistband of his breeches.
Yeah, and I don't think Adamson would even have said something like, well, he also had a revolver that we didn't know about, unless that factored in somehow to his rationalization of how it all went down. Because he would have just said he had a Winchester and a revolver.
Yeah.
But he had to add that fact that, like, we didn't know about that one. And so, like, to me, just my opinion, that says to me that they both were under the impression, perhaps even Wayne Brazel himself gave them that impression. Maybe he said something on the road that was indicative of, hey, I've just got this Winchester. But, because David Thomas talks about how he thinks Brazel goaded Garrett into a fight to get him riled up so he could kill him in self-defense.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then Brazel could have easily indicated, hey, I've just got this Winchester. And then, boom, you've got him. But I think that factors in. I think that that's why Garrett's head was turned. He returned to the buggy to get his shotgun because he thought he had the drop on him. And he didn't.
And then you have to think about the fact that we know that it was loaded with number 8 birdshot.
Yeah, that's why I think Garrett was definitely goaded into it and was not planning on it.
And what do you think Garrett was thinking in that moment, knowing only he had birdshot? I mean, he could have definitely, obviously, hurt Wayne Brazel very badly, but he wasn't going to kill him.
Yeah, just thought I'd shoot him in the face and take care of it.
Or maybe he didn't think Brazel would do a damn thing.
Right. Well, some have speculated that he thought he was just going to scare him off,
Right. Because he's Pat Garrett, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, I could see Pat having that kind of mentality in that exact situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Very interesting. So, yeah, I mean, so the trousers, it's never mentioned once. Preliminary, trial, nothing.
Yeah.
So, I'm not really sure, but I think that the misdescription between how it was stated and how it was written would be the best, easiest A to B scenario without, getting it too twisted up with too many other possibilities. It just, what's the simplest way? I think that might be the easiest way because nobody else is saying that. And again, I got these took them right out of his book in quotation marks because this is perfect. That's why the book is so damn good. Because David comments, this detail is never mentioned in Adamson's eyewitness testimony, and indeed, if true, would have proved him a liar.
Right.
That's a great point because, like I said, he gave his account 5 times, and he never wavered. He never differentiated, never said a different detail, twice under oath. And like you said, they drag him out there twice because they're like, district attorney wants to find something wrong with the scenario because maybe it just doesn't, maybe in Hervey's mind, he's like, something's not right here. This is definitely fishy and I get it. So maybe that's what the whole point, like you were saying, is he wanted Adamson to slip up on a detail.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rollins says, I'm inclined to think that at close range, even number 8 shot will keep a fairly tight pattern and a hit to the chest could well be fatal. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to get hit.
Yeah. I mean, if you were that close as they were, I mean, Brazel was right behind him on a horse. Yeah.
And Pat probably was just mad enough to give it a shot anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So the last part of this, hey, real quick, I had you download that stuff.
Yes.
Let's throw up a photo of Carl Adamson real quick, just so everyone can kind of, you don't see a lot of photos of him. I've only seen this one photo that David had in his book, but the guy that has been testifying all these times and the one eyewitness, there he is. So there's Carl Adamson, just in case anybody, that is, that is in David's book. And I have never seen another picture of him.
I want to say something real quick, just about the general Western culture. There is such a trend of denting this side of the hat. You see it in the picture of Dan Dedrick.
Very true.
From the same time, about the same time Billy had his picture taken. You see it in a ton of pictures, and it's not like, it's like an intentional, really large indentation of where they grab the hat or whatever, but it seems to be like a fashion statement. And I'd love for anyone who knows to let us know, like, why was that done? It's not a double, a lot of hats, about all the hats you see today are double indented, Right. This looks like it's something that they've done after they purchased it, and they just cave in that side. And so many pictures of dudes with these hats. It's
a good point because it looks like the size of a softball.
Yeah, and that Dedrick photo is the same, and I've seen countless that are like that, and it's just very interesting. I've always wondered about that.
Yeah. Okay, man. Yeah, that's a good point. And now you say that. Now I have all these images well-known images that I've looked at numerous times, and that whole denting on the side is very, very common. Good point. We'll do a whole episode on the denting of cowboy hats.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, he's found not guilty. Grounds of self-defense. There you have it. Okay. So here's some stuff. We're going to lead in with the last. This stuff to me gets really interesting. This last part of Wayne Brazel's situation. Okay. Yeah. So let's do all this stuff. And then we're going to go into conspiracy theories, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So all this stuff is about Wayne. Okay. So sometime around 1903, Brazel began working on and off for W.W. Cox as a ranch hand at the St. Augustine Ranch. In the winter of 1906, he met a woman named Olive Elizabeth Boyd, and she became his true love, and they quickly planned to be married. And that marriage was on its way to being prepared and planned when he shot Garrett. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's going to get, postponed for a little bit. Olive worked as a nanny and a tutor at the ranch for about a year before she began teaching at the school at the Gold Camp. Now, Robert Mullen's article from the El Paso Historical Society 1971 that I mentioned last week, he had something in there, whether this is his opinion or not. It wasn't in quotation marks specifically, so I don't know if it was a quote by somebody, but it was a good point to point out that in his article, it's called The Strange Story of Wayne Brazel. He says that the purpose of leasing the Rock House Ranch and then turning around and purchasing the goats, was so Brazel could provide a financial stability for a future family. When the other side of it is he did it on purpose in order to piss Garrett off, right? It's all part of the conspiracy. We'll talk about that, right? But that's the other part is the conspiracy is that, nope, that was all done purposely in order to either incite Garrett with anger. You know what I mean? I'm not sure, but I believe that him wanting a better financial future, as we look at the details, I feel like that's probably a better evaluation of what he was doing at the time.
I agree. I think it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Especially because he didn't even seem to, there wasn't much of an incentive to even sell. Like he would be okay if everything fell through and everybody went back to their normal lives.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly like he was trying to get anything out of it.
Yeah. Well, and, after the Garrett filed a complaint in 1907 over that statute, and even though he withdrew it, there was still a whole year between that and Garrett's killing, so maybe that situation with Garrett, maybe it, made Brazel want to make a change, who knows,
Yeah.
And we also talked about this, but I'll bring it up again because it's so prominent to sticking holes in conspiracy theories. We talked about this, and I did a post on this too. February 7th, 1908, 22 days before Garrett's death, Albert Bacon Fall, one of New Mexico's most prominent and powerful politicians, writes a personal recommendation for Wayne Brazel to become a territorial policeman, right? A position that was almost equivalent to being a Texas Ranger in New Mexico. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
George Curry, Santa Fe, New Mexico. My dear governor, Wayne Brazel of Donna Ana County, Oregon Post Office, has written me asking for my endorsement for appointment as a member of the Mounted Police Force. I have known Wayne for years, and I believe that he would make a good officer. He is steady, quiet, and I think competent. Very sincerely yours, Albert Bacon Fall. 22 days before his death. Sorry. I'm having some mic issues here. 22 days. That is a staggering short amount of time than to turn around and end up killing a man and risking everything that you've been working on, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting turn of events for Wayne, which to me is just showing that he was trying to stabilize himself and ground himself. And I also goes to me, for me anyway, it shows that everything that happened there on the road just happened out of anger and in that argument and in that moment.
Yeah.
That's how I take it. The more things we're going to read about, Wayne, it just seems like more and more, right? Because the conspiracy theories, no matter what they are, they all require Wayne to be the patsy, right? Doesn't matter. He's the one who goes trial. If you want to say, oh no, Jim Miller killed him and he's the patsy. Oh, Pritt Rote killed him. He's still the patsy.
Yeah.
He's still the one who has to take that whole risk of being, sentenced to death. He could hang. You got to be kidding me. Yeah. Right? That, so 22 days, very interesting that happens for him and probably was going to happen. I bet you anything he would have gotten the job.
Yeah, he probably would have.
Yeah. Okay, so Wayne Brazel finally gets to marry Olive Boyd on September 5th, 1910. Approximately 1 year before he married Olive, October of 1909, he went into a partnership with a guy named William D. Buck and A.M. Shoemaker. Brazel's going to end up purchasing a 160-acre homestead near Lordsburg. I'm not sure. I know it's in New Mexico, but I don't know where that is. It was a strong adobe, and he had access to water, and it was a watering hole called Harrington's Well. Okay, so he's doing good after the trial, right? He's really kind of getting back on track. He's married now. Jesse Von Brazel, born June 7th, 1911. Okay, and we talked about this, and regardless of the situation, I still think it sucks and it's really sad. November 16th, 1911, after a month-long battle with pneumonia, Olive Boyd died with Wayne Brazel present at her side. And this apparently just tore Wayne apart, right? And Ed Rode, who was related to Print Rode, would later say, he was quoted saying that Wayne just seemed to lose interest in everything. All he talked about was leaving the ranch.
Man.
Yeah. It's hard, kind of, you know what I mean? It's the same thing when you read about everything that happens to Pat Garrett's kids. That alone makes me feel for that man so much. You know what I mean? Just to have so many kids with so many problems. It's, oh man. So, you know, that happens. It devastates him. But he continues forward. Okay, Brazel is going to complete some improvements on his new homestead that he bought, and he filed for a patent. And once it was approved, he's going to sell the homestead to a man named Joseph Olney. And then he took a job with a cattle crew in Arizona. February 27th, 1913. This is the same day that he sold the homestead. W.W. Cox sued Wayne Brazel for the repayment of two loans, totaling $1,506.16. The first loan was on June 29th, 1907, which Brazel used to buy the goats. Second loan was for $300 on May 18th, 1909, 2 weeks after being acquitted. Both loans carried an interest rate at 10% per year.
Getting sued by one of the guys who was a conspirator in the death of Pat Garrett would have been a great time for a patsy to come clean.
Yeah. Very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Remember everything we talked about W.W. Cox and how he's the financier of all of this stuff. But this guy apparently was so well known for keeping meticulous records.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Okay. But even though he gets this bad news, he just sold his homestead. He gets sued by his former employer. April 21st, 1913, about 51 days or so after selling his homestead, Brazel paid W.W. Cox $1,506.16 and satisfied all outstanding debt.
I wonder, I figure Cox sued him at that time because he knew he was making money from selling his homestead.
I would say absolutely. Because, Cox, does he need the money? Probably not.
Right.
But back then, $1,500 is a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Cox was wealthy, but yeah, $1,500. That's $1,500. So yeah. But the timing seems far more than coincidence that he would just kind of wait for, 2-3 years, 10 years, however long, and then come out and go, hey, you've got money now. So how about I sue you?
Heard you sold your farm.
Wayne, how's it going? Okay. And then check this out. April 24th, 1914. Wayne Brazel and Joseph Olney, who he sold the homestead to, they're going to get arrested for perjury. Okay. Mm-hmm. Brazel was being accused of apparently he falsified. That's what he's being accused of, that he falsified his patent requirements, that he completed them. Okay. And then Olney was arrested for participating in a fraudulent patent application. Very interesting. Okay. July 10th, 1914. Wayne Brazel registered to vote at Ash Fork, Yavapai County. Arizona. He gave his height as 5'7" and weight as 180 pounds. His
So
perjury case was rescheduled for May, but then was rescheduled to November 1914. And on November 11th, 1914, with Wayne Brazel present, the Assistant District Attorney for New Mexico, E.C. Wade Jr., asked the case to be dismissed due to lack of evidence. They made another hearing for 6 days later on November 20th. When Wayne Brazel exited the Santa Fe courthouse on November 11th, 1914, he was never seen nor heard from again. Ever.
it's nuts, man.
That right there, I feel, is enough to where, I mean, I've said this before, that's where the conspiracy theory should start. You know what I mean? If people were really clicked on that and really are so centered and like, I'm going to prove this one way or the other, you know, I know how that feeling goes and you just can't stop. That right there, he pays all of his outstanding debt. He registers to vote.
His case is about to get dropped.
Right. And he attends all the hearings that he's required to. He comes back from Arizona, right? He does everything he's supposed to do. And then once he exits that courthouse, he's never seen or heard from again. 6 days later, November 20th, his perjury case is dismissed.
What in the world, you know?
Well, you had mentioned this, and I should have some point pondered this, but I never had. But now that we know some of these quotes and, you know, comments made by family of how Olive's death affected him, and you said that's a good chance he may have killed himself.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think he just decided to give it all up and just wandered off and died somehow.
It's quite possible, man. Or another unrecorded death like all of the thousands and thousands that there were at that time.
I'd be interested to know if when he actually disappeared. I know he disappeared from public view when he left that courthouse, but did his friends and family see him for maybe a few weeks following or what? You know, when did he leave his son with what? His mother-in-law or his mother?
Yeah, he left Jesse with Olive's parents, I believe, and just didn't come back.
I wonder if that was before his trip back to New Mexico. Like,
yes.
Why did he go to Arizona? What was he going to do in Arizona? Did he take?
Remember, he took that job with that Arizona cattle crew.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening.
And then came back and got sued. So he came back and then he got, arrested for perjury. And he still attended everything he was supposed to do. And he made that right. And then he vanishes.
I agree with you. I think folks should be way more interested in this part of the story. Like it would be a trip to find out what happened. And I know, there's that outlandish story that his son later on hired a detective to find his father, and the detective
apparently that's true. David has that part in the book. It comes from some family letters and the attorney, because apparently Wayne Brazel paid out a life insurance, right, for the son, for Jesse Von Brazel. But as it turns out, he only paid the premium on it one time and then never paid it again.
So I'd be, and then that detective apparently came to the conclusion that Brazel went to South Africa and was killed by Butch Cassidy, which I'm going to say probably is not true.
Yeah. No, they did. There was some rumor type stuff, but that's it. But I didn't ever come across anything that said here was a sighting of Wayne Brazel or anything like that. No, just some rumors that he apparently maybe went to South America. Maybe he went to Cuba. I mean, but no one knew. So I think it was just speculation at that point.
You said this was the last photo here taken of Brazel.
That's the last photo of him taken in Phoenix, Arizona, 1914.
What's the story with the teddy bear, man?
Never been able to come across anything that solidifies it. David might have said something about it and maybe we might have missed it, but I don't think so. I've looked over that book so many times and I've never seen anything about that damn teddy bear. It's like maybe he was just trying to be a silly.
I think he was a prankster kind of guy. Yeah. And, I think he really showed that off in pictures, like with the other one with the torn wardrobe and everything and the shaved head.
Sure.
And I think that's just kind of the kind of guy he was. It was probably maybe his kid's teddy bear, and he was like, "Let me get this in the picture."
Oh, that could be it. No, that's a good one.
Yeah.
But that is supposedly the last known photo of him right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Do you have that photo of Olive Boyd's grave?
I do. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one. She's got a good grave marker.
And so he disappeared, say around 1914.
When he exits the courthouse in Santa Fe at November 11th, 1914 for that hearing.
So, I mean,
he doesn't come back 6 days later when it's dismissed.
Close to 3 years past his wife's death there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's her. Yeah, and I don't know, I hate these ones that are like, it's got really good, like the chiseling, the letters and everything is really good, but it's like the color of the stone, it's hard to see.
Yeah.
But it should say Olive E. Boyd.
Yep.
The wife of J.W. Brazel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. December 21st, 1888 to November 16th, 1911. Asleep. I think it says with Jesus. Or asleep in Jesus, perhaps, I think.
Looks about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Pretty sad. Pretty sad. So, yeah. To me, I feel like the first time I read that he disappeared like that, my jaw was on the floor.
Yeah, immediately.
Because, and all these things, look at everything he's doing the right way. These aren't usually the things that someone does right before they just disappear.
Yeah, but it's finally going for him. He's getting everything lined up.
Yeah. It's very odd. If they had all these reports of how miserable he had become, which apparently he was very depressed, but he still moved on and did all of these things. And you never know. Maybe he would have disappeared sooner if some of these things hadn't happened, like being sued by W.W. Cox or whatever, never know. He could have disappeared sooner.
It's the unknown that makes us wonder all these things and maybe even exaggerate them, because in all reality, he may have just... maybe his horse got spooked and they ran off a cliff. Maybe he got just randomly killed by some, wandering vagrant and his body hidden. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
It could have been literally anything and completely meaningless and devoid of any larger conspiracy or inner motivation on his part. It's just, we just don't know. And that's crazy. That's what motivates us in instances like these.
Yeah. Well, and the speculation possibly that he did kill himself, man, he went somewhere where he knew he wouldn't be found.
Misty says it was bears. It was definitely bears.
Never know.
Yeah.
Never know. Come across his body and got rid of the evidence. You never know. All right. I mean, of course, we've got the conspiracy theories is all that's left. But there's a lot of them, but it's different, right? Because there's not newspaper articles. There's not stuff to actually support it, right? It's just the theories, but we're going to run through them the best we can. And then how I think a lot of them, we just talk about the details of how they're brought up. And then all of the facts we've laid out in these first 2 episodes, I just don't understand how they got as far as they did. I understand. I get it. But when we look at some of these theories and how they come into play, you kind of have to step back and go, what is going on? But unlike Billy's case, right, with the kid, doesn't start happening until the 1920s when that random anonymous letter shows up at New Mexico Historical Society. Some guy saying, oh, Billy's alive and well. He's working on a ranch in like Hillsboro or something like that. And he's doing this and he's got a kid, all this crap, right? And then, of course, sparks up this huge thing. And then, there it goes. But otherwise, it was pretty quiet for about 40 years, 45 years before people started, saying all this shit about Billy. With Pat, it was instantaneous, right?
Yep.
Very quick.
Within days. Yeah.
Yep, within days. March 3rd, March 4th, the day before Pat's funeral, Pat Garrett received an anonymous letter sent from El Paso. It was printed with lead pencil on cheap paper. What is wrong with me today?
Pepper.
The letter stated that Wayne Brazel shot Garrett from the back, and then another shot him from the front. Hanging without trial is what Brazel deserves. The letter also praised Garrett as a lawman and also stated that Poe Garrett would also be murdered. It was signed, One Who Knows. That was printed in the El Paso Herald, March 5th, 1908. Okay. I did a post about this the other day. I don't know all the people saw it. It was on YouTube and our Facebook group. Print Road conspiracy letter sent April 22nd, 1908 to Annie Garrett. So Dad's dead. He's buried. Brazel's been bonded out. He's back at home with Olive Boyd. His trial's not supposed to be originally for October. So this is just kind of a layover period, right? And then all of a sudden she gets this letter. But April 22nd, that's like a month and a half, right?
Yeah.
And not that much longer after Poe Garrett got his letter. Now, if you would like to throw up that conspiracy letter, we can take a look at this ridiculous writing. Now, first off, whoever this is, okay, let's check this out. Okay, this is what sucks. You got so much to cover, but we have to go over these details. So whoever the anonymous letter sends to Poe Garrett literally does not take away from the fact that Wayne Brazel shot him, right?
Yeah.
It literally states that. It says shot by someone else from the front. Now, when Annie Garrett gets the letter on April 22nd, it says that Prince Rhodes, right? Doesn't call him Print, calls him Prince. And that he was out there that day and that he's the one, right? He's the other one who shot Brazel. But the one thing about this conspiracy letter that gets sent to her, the information is just, it's not real information, right? He's not, whoever this is, it makes you wonder, do they not like Print Road? Is it meant to throw something off everybody? I don't know, because the anonymous letter to Poe Garrett literally is stating that Wayne Brazel did shoot him and Wayne Brazel should be hung without trial. Second letter to Annie is putting the name apparently to the second person who shot him, which apparently is supposedly Print Road. Okay. Now, if anyone's really noticing these last two episodes, we've barely mentioned Print Road at all. And that is because he's not a part of any of it legally. So how and why his name is one of the biggest ones along with Miller that run in these conspiracy theories. Let's go over some of these reasons why. Okay. So this letter, Prince Rhodes was out there. This was a put up job. This letter refers to themselves as a friend and that they will say who they are when things is right. Right. Other than that, there's no information that changes anything there. And obviously April 22nd, 1908, she receives the letter. They had this letter before the trial. And I honestly think they didn't really feel they needed to do anything with it. You know what I mean? Like if they had these conspiracy letters, the trial this is not till 1909.
Oh, yeah.
They could have used these letters. They could have examined them. I mean, I just don't think they took them seriously at all. Maybe not.
I would love to know who wrote it.
I know, because it kind of makes you wonder, like, are they trying to help Wayne Brazel or are they not? Are they making a conspiracy theory or are they just placing Print Road out there?
Or is it more about them just wanting to mess with Garrett's family? Like,
dude, never know.
What if it's like Oliver Lee and those Fountain people that are
right? Yeah, and we'll talk about that. Yeah. So and so in this theory, right, which has been repeated probably the most over the years, is that Print Road was shadowing Adamson, Brazel, and Garrett. Nuts to me that someone would think that Garrett or Adamson wouldn't notice that, but okay. And in this theory, Print Road is the man conveniently speaking to Brazel in the road when Adamson first saw him, which he testified to. But Adamson also said that man passed right by them on the horse. Galloped right past them. Now Pat Garrett dies, so he can't testify. However, you're trying to tell me if Print Road passes Pat Garrett's not going to think something is really odd about that. And here's why. So why do they have Print Road? Other than the conspiracy letters, why is his name even being a part of this? Okay. So when Wayne Brazel shoots Garrett at that time, he is working up at the Mormon mine at the Hagen, and he's living at the Hagen house, right? It's owned by W.W. Cox, and he works with Print Road. They're good friends. There's some quotes that David had in his book that come from Road family letters later on, and there's quotes that like, oh, that Wayne and Print Road were like never far away from each other, and they were always at each other's side and all this stuff, right? Okay, but in this theory, Print Road is the one who's going to sneak up behind Garrett and shoot him in the back of the head. And in this theory, of course, Garrett is urinating too. It's stated very clearly. That's the only way it works, right? Because Adamson has to be completely undetected and pull up right behind him when they pull over on the side. And the timing, of course, is just flawless and perfect, right?
It's like Ocean's 11.
Which I'm being sarcastic. Okay.
Yeah.
So that theory is big, but it's all based on assumption. Okay. Here we go. February 1900, Print Road was arrested in connection with the Bowman bank robbery in Las Cruces. Okay. He actually wasn't arrested by Garrett, though. He was picked up by Garrett's deputy named Ben Williams as an accessory, not one of the actual robbers. The robbers were William Wilson and Oscar J. Wilbur. They were arrested on February 12th, 1900. That was the day they robbed the bank. Pat was actually in the bank that morning depositing a check, and then they robbed it later that afternoon. Okay. Now, Oscar J. Wilbur, when he is arrested, he has a saddle and he has a horse that Ben Williams, this deputy, says that he recognizes. Okay. And he says that he recognizes that horse and that saddle as a few years before this belonging to Archie Print Road. And then Oscar J. Wilbur is going to tell Deputy Ben Williams, well, yeah, he's the one who sold it to me. Okay. So I actually have an issue with this. It's very weird. So Ben Williams takes that information, even though it was a few years before this, and he goes and he arrests Print Rhodes on suspicion of being an accessory to the bank robbery. Okay. That's why he picked him up. Okay.
There's
I thought that was kind of odd, but it was all over about the horse and the saddle that Rhodes, did sell to him. When Williams goes out and asks him, did you sell that, to him? He's like, yeah, like a couple of years ago. Okay. What's it look like? What's the saddle look like? And Print goes, I don't remember. So Ben Williams arrests him on suspicion. Wow. Okay. The trial for this is going to start in late April. And in the end, Print Road was found not guilty. And he was only an accessory. And this is important because this is repeated as the motive.
Right.
Bad blood. Right? Because Garrett, quote unquote, arrested Print Road. No, he didn't. Nobody even wants to work hard enough to just read like 2 newspaper articles and you can find out who actually arrested him. And then he's found not guilty. Right. So then he waits 8 years to plot Pat Garrett's death.
Day and night.
Dude. Okay. Okay. So that's the motive, right? That's what it is his involvement in that and being arrested by Garrett, and it pissed off Print Road. Okay. The other thing that they are going to say that is, hey, you read this. It's in quite a few books, at least when it talks about Garrett's death in this scenario. A lot of historians have used the fact that Print Road was a silent partner of Wayne Brazel's in those ranches and goats deal, right?
Right.
Now that's very convenient since his name, of course, doesn't exist in any of the documentation involving the deal. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if Brazel and Road were friends, okay. Now check this out. Again, perfect. David G. Thomas comments. Road was not Brazel's partner in any legal sense of the word. He was probably what today would be called a contract employee. He was working for Brazel for a share of what Brazel made. So, if they were partners, Print Road would have been paid his share of the deal. End quote. Right?
Yeah.
Again, these theories, they just, to me, you have so many little details that, man, that's interesting. It's coincidental, but it's interesting. And then the next thing comes around of the facts, and we can just, kind of stick a little hole in it. And that's what I love doing. But that's a good point. David said, well, why would, if Brent Rode was a silent partner, he would have made money on the deal.
Exactly.
So again, great point by David, because that's just, man, I read it again and I'm like, dude, that's such a good point. Like, right. Why would Brent Rode kill him if he actually was part of this whole deal?
Because
but we know
years ago.
Right. Exactly. And note the numerous articles involving his death. Brent Rode is not mentioned except one time, and that was the article you found.
Right.
If you have that, and we talked about this, so after you said you found it, I had to go back and start searching again, and then I couldn't find anything else, no matter how many times I switched the search terms, and you said I didn't find any other article that supports any of this.
Yeah.
The question is whether or not you still have it, because you sent it to me.
Yeah, I'm looking now. It also, I think there was one also that said JP Turner.
It's the same article. Yeah. Yeah, the one you sent me.
Yes.
So we talked about that apparently Jim Miller was going by JP Turner in this deal, and that that was, a good reason why Pat wouldn't have known who he was getting involved with, right?
Yeah.
Well, I told you I couldn't find nothing, and then that one article you found, it says that Prince Rode was Wayne Brazel's partner, and that they were selling cattle to a man named JP Turner from El Paso, Texas. And then you and I talked about the fact that there was not one other article that states any of this information.
Yeah. So
everything else is Carl Adamson, right? Everything else is all these names. We've been dealing with this the entire time. And then this one article, when you showed that to me, the first thing I started thinking of was, when this happens, because it does happen a lot, you have that one article that will trip up historians, trip up researchers, because you want to know, why does this have the complete opposite information of all of the other 35 articles that were written? And I made a comment to you that going, I've always wondered if it was someone purposely trying to misdirect.
So that came out of Beaumont, Texas, Beaumont Enterprise.
Gotcha.
It was March 1st. So a day after.
That's the next day.
Yeah, they're talking about possible motive. And it says, it is said that Garrett 6 months ago leased for a term of 5 years a ranch to Wayne Brazel and A.P. Rhodes. On this property, they placed a herd of sheep, and a few days ago entered into an agreement with J.P. Turner of Fort Worth and Carl Adamson of Roswell to sublet the property to them. They also agreed to sell these men their sheep. Garrett is said to have objected to this agreement, stating he believed Brazel had forfeited his lease and declaring his intention of resorting to courts to establish his rights. So it gets a lot wrong.
Yeah. But you have to wonder, where did all of those intricate details that are in that article, who gave them?
Yeah, where'd that come from? A day after.
And also, I would say, since that was the only one that we saw. I mean, I went back and read all the ones I already had and looked at, I went to Colorado, Texas. I did everything. I couldn't find anything. I put in Archie Road. I put AP Road. I put everything that I could think of, and nothing. Other than finding the one that you sent me.
Yeah.
I just came across, I'm like, there it is. So, at least I think it was the same one. But either way, I am going to go out on a big major limb here and say that is how the Print Road information got in there that quickly, because then the conspiracy note the first one is going to go to Poe Garrett not even a couple days after, right? March 3rd, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Annie's one, but the first letter to Poe doesn't mention Print Road by name. Only the letter to Annie Garrett mentions him by name. So very interesting. But I think that is what most historians have decided to go off of. If they came across that article like you did, then I would imagine that would be it, because there's nothing in the legal documentation to tie him to any of it at all. None. Nobody can place him there. Hell, I mean, I haven't heard anyone even be able to place him in New Mexico. Where's he at? You know, I mean, I don't believe it at all. I just feel that one article is, you know, someone that's got some information and it's either right to them or it's completely wrong, period. I don't know. But considering we couldn't find anything else to really support that, what it says in that article, I don't know. But either way, you know, that is one of the biggest conspiracies is that Print Road was a part of it. Now, there's a lot of details, right? Wayne Brazel still has to be the patsy. And in this theory, well, they say that Brazel, well, he accepted the role because they were friends and Print Road had a family. Well, we know Wayne was trying to do the exact same thing. So that kind of contradicts a little bit. And we also know Wayne was also trying to become a mounted policeman. So him saying, oh, okay, I'll be the patsy because you have a family. I don't think that holds up at all.
Right.
That's me personally, you know.
And I never want to be involved in a conspiracy where you're in the crossfire of the other guy.
Yeah, it just seems, you know.
like, okay, so Print is hiding in a bush from one direction and shooting at Garrett. What if he misses and hits Wayne?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. The whole sniper thing with the Winchester rifle, and they shot him from like a rock. Really? There were other people down there. There were horses. Like, yeah, if you didn't hit Garrett, you're having a big gun battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's risky. Some of these theories, they get worse.
Yeah.
So, and also too, they say in this theory, well, what was the point? Well, how they do? Well, the theory was suggesting that this was all in order to lure Garrett out in the open, right? And they can only apparently do that on the day that Adamson and Garrett were riding into Las Cruces. However, pretty easy to prove that Garrett traveled that same road constantly all the time because it was the only way to get into Las Cruces.
Yeah, very popular road. Everybody loves the road.
Very popular road, and he frequented it all the time. So, again, another thing that just why is that the day he chooses to do it?
Mm-hmm.
When, like said, if he was a partner, he would have been paid. So he just wanted to kill Garrett just to out of spite, and, you know, and take money out of his pocket. I don't know. I don't know. But here's another reason why they say, okay, motive and Print Road's definitely capable of murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
July 8th, 1910, Print Road shot and killed a man named Henry Lee Murphy, his brother-in-law. This took place near Camp Verde, Arizona. The men were partners in a cattle firm together, and according to the one witness, a man named George Reed, it was a dispute over how to split the proceeds from a big cattle sale. Very interesting. The trial took place on May 16th, 1911 in Prescott, Arizona. Cynthia Murphy, the widow, testified at trial that 2 weeks before the shooting, Print Road apparently threatened Henry with the words, "I'll get you and your whole damn family yet." Cynthia testified that she heard 3 shots and started running down the road. She found Henry lying on his face, but he wasn't dead. She hollered at the children to fetch some water. She held his head in her hands, and he died a few moments later. Print Road testified, and his version says Henry Murphy was armed with a rock, and Murphy once boasted that he'd once killed a cow with a rock, and he thought his life was in danger. After 8 hours, the jury returned with a verdict of second-degree murder. Print Road was sentenced to 20 years. Oh, and it gets better and better. After only 2 years in prison, after much lobbying by his friends, especially W. Cox, who was married to Print Road's sister, Print Road was released into the custody of New Mexico Governor William Mills and W. Cox. Road was pardoned by the governor of Arizona on April 28th, 1916. Wow. Yeah. That's some crazy shit. That is nuts. So, in researching, out of all, other than stating the fact that Print Road was friends with Brazel, they worked up the Mormon Mind together, okay? And then that one article, and then the bad blood, remember, that was 8 years previous, by the way, and he was found not guilty, so nothing happened to him for that. One thing I did find, kind of interesting. It's not close, but remember earlier, Wayne Brazel, after he sells the homestead, he registers to vote in Yavapai County, right, in Arizona, and he was working with that cattle crew. This is about one of the closest things that I could find connecting Print Road and Wayne Brazel, other than these obvious assumptions. According to the federal census of 1910 and 1911, Print Road was living in township number 13, Yavapai County, Arizona, with his spouse and 2 children. That's it.
Pretty local, yeah.
Yeah. It's all about all I could find. Okay, here we go. Now, in every conspiracy, regardless, okay? Now, let's talk of one that I like a lot. I don't like it, but it cracks me up. Okay.
Some are more fun than others.
Exactly. I agree. So what about, does anyone know the Colin Rickards book? Do you have that photo, Bane? James, Sheriff Pat Garrett's Last Day.
I do. Stand by.
Yes, sir. Okay.
I read that book actually very recently.
Yeah, I've had it. The photo I have is a photo of my copy that I took on, because I've had that book for a long time, buying it completely thinking it was something different. Okay, so one particular conspiracy that has seemed to continuously gain momentum after the release of the 1970 book, How Pat Garrett Died by Colin Rickards. This book was re-released in 1984 under the title Sheriff Pat Garrett's Last Day. So in his book, Colin Rickards suggested one of the most elaborate conspiracies that I have ever heard of in order to kill one man. This conspiracy is W.W. Cox, Albert Bacon Fall, Oliver Lee, Jim Gilliland, Britt Road, James Deacon Jim Miller, Carl Adamson, and Manny Clements. Their sole purpose for killing Garrett? So W.W. Cox could obtain Garrett's home ranch. Why? Those reasons I've noticed kind of vary depending on the quote-unquote source. The most repetitive that I have seen or read is because Garrett had personal access to his own water, right?
Yeah.
Now, all the men mentioned above, according to Colin Rickards, he literally says this is what he thinks happens and then explains the biggest conspiracy ever. So according to Rickards, these men, all of the men I just mentioned above, met at the St. Regis Hotel in El Paso, Texas in fall of 1907 in order to design this elaborate conspiracy. Okay. So in this conspiracy, Jim Miller would be paid $5,000 to kill Garrett if they couldn't drive him out of the territory with their financial scheme. Right?
Of holding Garrett accountable on a loan he signed on.
Exactly. Okay. So $5,000. W.W. Cox is the financier of this whole thing. He wants Garrett's ranch. That's the conspiracy, because it has access to water. Except, as you recall, December 10th, 1897, Pat Garrett, no, 1887, 97. What? We had it in the notes. It's literally in episode 1 and 2. We talked about it like 16 different times. We showed the newspaper article. W.W. Cox sold him the home ranch property with those watering holes. And then you tell me he waits. Yes, it was 1897 because I have it in my notes. He waits 11 years later, again, to create this elaborate conspiracy just to get the home ranch. Well, that doesn't really work if Cox was the one who sold him the property that had that watering hole. And it also doesn't work because, remember, he owned the mortgage on it. He bought it from Martin Lohman. He could have just foreclosed on Garrett whenever he wanted to.
Yeah, that's a fact.
You don't, I mean, that right there, like why would the goal be to obtain the ranch because it has water? Why would that be the reason? You're going to kill him for that? But you can also say the conspiracy theory's got a lot of, stuff we've already talked about, that Garrett was getting pretty ornery and getting pretty pissy and not a lot of people were liking him. And that could have played hand in hand as well. But when you make up a conspiracy like that and the man you use as the one who's financing all of it, I mean, again, we've looked at everything that man did in the court records and, made sure there was something that someone could look at and say, yes, W.W. Cox paid this amount. He renewed the mortgage on this date. Then he paid this amount, So one thing, of course, that Colin Rickard's theories, they just don't have the right things. There's the proper dates, names, locations, nothing cited from original sources. It's just hearsay, and it's all verbal nonsense 50 to 80 years after the fact. And it's always by someone who isn't a legitimate source. But people are so willing to believe it, and I don't understand that because they want to believe it, I guess.
The nephew of a neighbor who heard this on this guy's deathbed.
Yeah. But here's the other big thing that the conspirators didn't know, wouldn't have known. Colin Rickard sure as hell didn't know in his research, is that, remember, when the Bank of Commerce out of Albuquerque seized Caesar and Replevin of all his property, they legally had to have it independently appraised. Right? They got it independently appraised by two different appraisers, and they valued the home ranch at $475.
Ouch.
Which you're going to pay Jim Miller $5,000 when Garrett's already willing to sell the ranches for $3,000.
I need them watering holes.
Yeah. So right there, when you have those kind of numbers, I just don't know how these things make it that far. Okay. Now, in Rickard's book, it's all in his book. He literally claims all this stuff. He says that the Rock House Ranch leasing by Wayne Brazel was to actually initiate the conspiracy.
Yeah.
Okay. And Rickard says in his book that Brazel agreed to be the patsy due to his unwavering loyalty to W.W. Cox. Now, he says, I have to say, he claims, Rickard's claimed, this was also done. They were doing this hoping that the financial situation would push Garrett out of the territory, right? That's what the theory says. He says they did this whole thing. They met at the St. Regis Hotel in the fall of 1907, even though the seizure in his property was the year before. So he was already in a financial situation. So that makes no sense. They're going to meet the year after to plan his financial downfall. Okay. So again, dates and stuff, just crossing the timeline wrong. So Rickard's claims that the financial situation, when it didn't chase Garrett out, then the assassination plot was a go. And the three major elements that Rickard suggested were that Cox wanted Garrett's home ranch so badly, he would hire someone to kill him for it. And that Brazel was willing to be the patsy and take chances of being sent to prison for life or being hung, And also, Miller needed Adamson and Brazel to initiate the pre-staging to lure Garrett out to the Alameda Arroyo Road. And according to Rickards, Adamson and Garrett both got out to urinate, and Jim Miller shot Garrett in the back of the head with a rifle shot. The other theory involving Miller removes the motive of Garrett's ranch and replaces it. This is the other theory, is it replaces it with Miller's pure psychopathic nature as the true motive, right? Yeah. He's a hired killer, so of course he killed Garrett. Right?
I want to buy this, but I just can't ignore my psychopathic nature.
Oh,
I'm going to kill this guy
exactly.
I'm trying to buy this ranch from.
Exactly. But everything in that book that we're looking at right there, Rickards literally claims all this stuff. He just keeps rolling and rolling with it, man. I mean, it's nuts how far he's willing to go. Okay, so there's we talked about Print Road. I don't see why that is even coming up again, other than the weird bad blood thing. I don't even know why. Again, we covered that. Rickard's conspiracy is mainly about W.W. Cox, but he is going to include Print Road, of course, in the meeting. But he says Jim Miller is the one who kills Garrett. Mm-hmm. So that's how he differs just slightly from the conspiracies. So now there's even been a couple of conspiracy authors. I don't even mind naming them. W.C. Jameson is one of them. I can't stand that guy's books because they're not real research. It's all conspiracy crap. He was a big brushy guy. He had a theory that Miller, since we were able to place him in numerous documentation, that he was at the Park Hotel, right? He arrived there by train, registered, and was in his room when Sheriff Felipe Lucero went to, and the district attorney went to go talk to him.
Right.
They are the ones that informed him that Garrett was dead. Okay. Now, the theory that people started getting up, because apparently this information, it's been out there long enough that someone could have seen these newspaper articles talking about Miller being at the Park Hotel. But of course, right, theories are always more exciting, right? Even though I still think that Garrett's death and Billy's death are just interesting on their own, you know. But, you know, this is always going to happen. But the theories just get more crazy. So this theory is that while he was in the Park Hotel, he snuck out, rented a horse from the stable, and then snuck over from Roosevelt County, New Mexico, and then rode his horse to death trying to make it back to Las Cruces.
Heck yeah.
Another writer, I had his name, I can't remember, one of those other conspiracy books, suggested that Miller is actually going to sneak from El Paso along the east side of the Oregon mountains, and then he snuck back the exact same way.
It's quite a ride.
Yeah, considering when Garrett and Adamson left Garrett's ranch, right? It just doesn't, it's not possible. It's just not. But yeah, so there's a couple of other Miller theories that have nothing, you know, that are still trying to say that, okay, yeah, you're right. He was in the Park Hotel, but he managed to get out there on that road and kill Garrett and then get back. Yeah. So that's another one. Now, oh man, let's do the Fred Fornoff.
Yeah.
The Fornoff report. Now, most people, I think anyone who's heard about Garrett's death has heard about the Fornoff report. Now, let's get cracking on this. I mean, we are damn near 5:20. That's all right, because we are not doing another episode. So the Fornoff report, I think this will probably be one of the last real theories that we really kind of have to address. Now, the only real, according to the conspiracy theories, the people that are aware of this is what they use. This is the one thing that Colin Rickards and, even Mark Lee Gardner has to bring it up. He has to mention it. Everyone does. That the only supposed evidence to support these conspiracy theories that Garrett's killing was premeditated supposedly came from a report by Fred Fornoff, a New Mexico mounted policeman, which summarized his investigation into the murder. Now, in this supposed report, Fornoff insists that he had learned from talking to people in El Paso that an elaborate conspiracy to kill Pat Garrett was definitely in action, right? He said he learned the names of all those involved. There's Fred Fornoff. He said he learned the names of all those involved, okay? And he made this big report. Now, can you view the report? Where is it? Let's talk about it. According to David G. Thomas, quote unquote, the Fornoff report does not exist.
There that is.
Every Garrett historian has included the Fornoff report as evidence in their chapters on Garrett's death, right? It's included, and some of them are in full swing in belief that this is true, right? Now, let's check this out. So, numerous articles on Garrett's death, the Fornoff report is brought up. The often cited evidence as the Fornoff report exists as follows. Researcher and author Chuck Hornung made a presentation at the 6th Annual Western Outlaw Lawman History Association, also known as WOLA, at the convention, in 1996. Now, Chuck Hornung is going to claim in 1996 that while he was researching his book on mounted policemen, he interviewed former mounted policeman Fred Lambert, who served with Captain Fornoff. That interview took place April 13th, 1968. Hornung asked Lambert about the murder of Sheriff Pat Garrett. He wasn't sheriff at the time, but that's interesting. Lambert claimed he viewed Fornoff's file on Garrett's death back in 1911. Lambert then recounted what he remembered seeing in the file. Brett Road was named the killer in Fornoff's report, and that Brazel wasn't a willing participant, but agreed to be the stooge because Road had a family. Fornoff suspected the second shot was fired by Adamson and he states that W.W. Cox was the financier of the entire operation. Okay.
I mean,
but what we just said, so that is the existence of that report. You don't find a report of it. Oh, this guy was writing a report, and there's a reason for this. And we're going to talk about that because there's more. Okay. There's a reason why this mistake happens with the Fornoff report. And it's because somehow Fornoff is going to be placed out there on that day in 1908, right?
wow.
With that crew, the coroner's jury and whatnot. But
and Fields and
yep, that's right. And again, kudos to David for being such a great researcher, because it doesn't seem like anyone was aware of this until he discovered this. Okay. John Deal. I sent you a picture of him and his family, and there was even in one of these articles, and we'll get to that. But okay. So in every conspiracy involving W.W. Cox, right, the driving motive was the desperation for Cox to purchase Garrett's home ranch. But as shown in previous posts, W.W. Cox purchased the mortgage for the ranch in 1905. He could have foreclosed. In Colin Rickard's big grandiose conspiracy, he also fails to mention the level of Cox's wealth and reputation, especially in New Mexico and in Texas. Okay. So by 1910, W.W. Cox owned more than 5 ranches, which accumulated him more than 13,000 acres. He was a stockholder and director of the Bowman Bank and Bascom French Company, and also a stockholder in the American National Bank of El Paso.
Dang. Around that time, you could probably say the Cox were pretty big.
He was. Now get this. This next one makes him probably the biggest at the time.
Yeah.
He also leased several thousand acres of land for the United States government and paid the taxes on every acre every year.
Man.
Yeah. But he has been plotting for 11 years to buy a $475 ranch and just kill people for it, right? I don't get that crap. Okay. So one of the biggest problems here is, how does this Fornoff thing happen? Okay. So both James Hervey and George Curry, in their memoirs, they stated that Fred Fornoff was with them back in 1908 when they went to the death site. According to David G. Thomas, they both just remembered it incorrectly, because it was not Fred Fornoff who was with them. It was John A. Beal, the same mounted policeman who testified for the defense for Wayne Brazel. He was investigating the feud over the goats and was asked by George Curry to travel to Las Cruces to investigate after Garrett was killed. Now, David Thomas has this great detail. David Thomas himself said this. In a search of all New Mexico territorial newspapers in 1908 for Fred Fornoff returned with 104 results. Not one placed him in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And then David is also going to argue in his book that Fornoff's travels were well documented in the territory, and that Garrett's killing was so big news, so massive, and there's not one mention of Fred Fornoff in any of those articles. However, El Paso Herald, March 4th, 1908, the article reports, simultaneously with the arrival of Governor George Curry, Ranger J.A. Beal also arrived from Deming. He was in the section in January and says the dispute between Garrett and Brazel was in progress at that time, and he made a report on it to the governor. Jeez.
So
following the shooting, Governor Curry wired him to come to Las Cruces at once, and his evidence will be used. He will also cooperate with local authorities if needed in preserving order.
My guess is that whoever wrote their memoirs first identified him as Fornoff, and the other one kind of just took that as authoritative and included Fornoff in their memoir too, because they couldn't remember the guy's name.
I would say that's a very good possibility because, that's difficult. When I was first reading his book, when I first bought it and I came across that part, I'm like, whoa, not just one of them, but two of them stated that he was the one that was out there.
Yeah.
And then now his name has been associated with Garrett's death in this ridiculous report. But as David said, that's literally the evidence for the Fornoff report. There's one guy saying that he saw the files in 1911. He repeats what he saw in 1968. And then Chuck Hornung presents it in the presentation in 1996.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a shame because there may or may not, I mean, it looks like 95, 98% there's no Fornoff report, but given a sliver of a possibility that there is, okay, anybody who, all of us have the right to call it bullshit until we see it.
Yeah.
And because that's, I mean, come on, this is like third hand.
Yeah. That is all it is, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
crazy.
Yeah. So that's really the stand we got to take on anything. It's that, it may or not be there. It may or may not say that stuff, but that's not authoritative because we don't have that source document.
True. Yeah. But like we said before, though, when you look at all this stuff in the service, on the surface and all the familial ties and everyone that's connected. Now, one thing we didn't mention, which you can talk about very, very quickly, Oliver Lee, his name is involved in there, but that all stems from, the Fountain investigation.
Right.
And a lot of people, I get it, how you think it might be connected, but if you know the Fountain investigation, at least the details that are available, the documented true details, not the conspiracy stuff that came out in the 70s, 80s, and the whole on the search for his remains thing that happened with Cold West. And I don't remember what year that was, but it's been probably over a decade since they were doing that whole thing. There has never been a full conclusion to what happened, to Fountain, Albert Fountain and his son Henry. And it's, I think it's definitely the biggest mystery in the history of the Wild West.
Yeah, personal opinion,
without a doubt.
Personal opinion, I think Oliver Lee was behind the whole thing, and they were clearly the folks that did it. But as it relates to Garrett, I think that Oliver Lee, McNew, all those guys probably got more pleasure out of him being alive than dead because they got off scot-free, and he knew it, and they knew it, and they enjoyed probably basking in that. I don't see that they had any reason to want him dead, honestly, but I'm not an expert on it, but that's just my take.
Well, so again, the Fountain thing is a whole thing. When we'll do an episode or 2 or 3 or something
or 7
in the future, or 7, But with Fountain, so there's some very crazy details there, man. So the day before, a couple days before he disappears, right? He exits the Lincoln County Courthouse, and he had just filed an indictment on 23 people for cattle depredations, cattle rustling. And some of the men on that list were Oliver Lee and Jim Gilliland.
Sure.
Bill McNew. Yeah. So, and of course there's the crazy note, right? Someone walks up to Albert Jennings Fountain and gives him a note. And it says, if you drop the note now, then we know friends. That you're right. But if you continue on, you will not make it home.
Yeah.
They literally, someone came up and gave a note saying you're going to get killed.
And I tell you what, I would have dropped that note.
I would have dropped the note too, man. Yeah. But something tells me that guy's career and his reputation, he's like, no, you're not going to scare me. Plus, he had already, remember, Albert Jennings Fountain went head to head with,
oh man,
with Jesse Evans, right? He had some history with him.
Yes. And he had been through a lot of altercations and been in shootouts in Texas. I mean,
sure,
he wasn't scared of this stuff.
No, and he was a soldier too.
A lot of these people lived with death in a way that was way more intimate and daily than we do. And I just don't think they were as scared to die, or maybe if they were as scared, just accepted it to where they could not be intimidated by that stuff. I do think, I know we're way off subject here, but I do think it was way messed up for Fountain's wife to say, take Henry, because they won't kill you with a little kid.
Right. Oh, that detail to me is just terrifying that thought even came across her mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I first read that too, I kind of had to just put the book down for a second, whatever I was reading. When I first heard about it, it was I think it was a separate article that I might have read, and then I've read Corey Recco's
Yeah.
book on it, and of course
Murder in the White
David's
Sands.
book. Yeah. The missing Pinkerton files on the his David's book is great.
I still haven't read that. I really want to read that.
Yeah, it's good. It's worth it. You got to pick it up. He's got there's a couple of his that I don't have yet that I haven't gotten around to getting, but just probably because based on their importance to me. But like I've heard a lot of people say that even though they love David's books, that his Reverend Taylor Ely book is probably the least interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have that
the
one.
Pinkerton one is good. Yeah, you got to get it.
I have Ely's, but the thing is, I don't know how much I had read the Ely book that focused on the Zunies and
right
all of that was printed way back, and it seemed to contain most of Ely's diaries and things. And so
yeah,
I don't think I've really dived into David's book on Ely, although I do have that one.
Yeah, I don't have it. I just have heard it's not very good, and so I just haven't gotten around to getting it yet. But I've got just.
Colin makes a good point. Colin says, "Didn't Dr. Ely do the same thing with his daughter to check out Ben Ellis at the 5-day battle?" And yeah, he did. Yeah, he was like, "Come on, and we're going to go take care of Ben." And they walked over to the Ellis house, and he basically used her as, a human shield, saying surely they won't shoot a kid. It's just like,
dude, I'm trying not to picture it that way, but it almost seems dude, there were bullets flying everywhere.
Yeah, I would never take one of my kids and be like, just rely on the morality of the other guy holding a rifle.
Right?
That's just horrible.
Well, and and so that whole thing with Oliver Lee and Fountain, it's a whole thing. Some people, if they've researched Garrett at all, they know this. So Garrett's with the Fountain case, what he ends up doing is he wants to keep it away. Garrett was kind of playing loose a little bit, and I think that came back to bite him in the ass when the trial came. Yeah, there were some things he did, like paying Jack Maxwell the $200 contract to testify, and that bit him in the ass big time. And plus, Albert Bacon-Fall is one hell of an attorney. He might be corrupt, but he's a great attorney.
Good, yes. Good.
Yeah, he's a good attorney. And I was reading some of those trial details, and I'm like, dude, Fountain was eating the prosecution for lunch, dude.
Yeah.
He was just tearing them apart. So there's that. But what happens is essentially that when Garrett's doing his investigation, he knows that someone will go and tell Oliver Lee and Jim Gill and all these guys that he's coming for them with warrants, right? So he tries to keep that information away from the grand jury. He doesn't want it to get out that he's coming for them. Now, William McNew, he ends up turning himself in, okay? But Jim Gilliland and Oliver Lee, they refuse. And then they kind of were like Billy the Kid for a while, right? They were staying with people that could help them, getting food, and continue to move along. And then Oliver Lee and Pat Garrett start getting in a letter battle in the newspapers. And Oliver Lee literally claims, Garrett's not coming to arrest me. He's coming to kill me. And I will not surrender to Pat Garrett. I will not.
I believe, to kind of touch on our Ingersoll was Garrett an atheist conversation, Lee even pointed that out.
Oliver Lee called him an infidel.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. He said he believes in neither God or the afterlife or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. When I think of one of the two strongest advocates for the Christian faith in the Old West, I think Oliver Lee and Frank James.
Yeah.
Defenders of scripture.
Yeah. But all of that, and of course I just brought it up here at the end, even though we're, closing things down, but the Oliver Lee thing, again, granted, I understand they had this bad blood, but again, this was 11 years before.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Fountain trial, the case, the whole thing was 1896. So, 12 years later in 1908, William Cox Oliver Lee does this to be a part of this big plot, but that's where all the historians will put in Oliver Lee as well as why he was part of this conspiracy in 1908 to, or 1907 when they were trying to plan to get Garrett out of the territory, because Oliver Lee and him had this whole thing with the fountain and he was being investigated. Also, let's not forget the shootout at Wildly Well.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal too. So very quickly, they don't turn themselves in, and they just keep moving along. A couple weeks later, Garrett's deputy, Kent Kearney, Garrett, and a few other posse members find out that Jim Gilliland and Oliver Lee are at Oliver Lee's at Wildly Well, which was a property of his. It was a well, a barn. There's lots of photos of Wildly Well. So anyway, they show up there, and of course now there's always been this big debate for years on who fired first, Deputy Ken Kearney or Jim Gilliland. But apparently it was later on in the trial. Garrett I remember Garrett did testify that it seemed like they both went to shoot simultaneously, but my deputy shot first. And Jim Gilliland and Oliver Lee are going to claim that they did not get a warning. They were sleeping on top of the roof barn, right? And then apparently Ken Kearney sees them and doesn't give a warning and, goes to open fire. And then Jim Gilliland pretty much raises up at the same time, shoots him once in the shoulder. And then as he was falling down, I think from the bar, he was shot again in the thigh. And then Kent Kearney is going to die about 4 days later. And that is one of the main motive reasonings for Oliver Lee to be mentioned 12 years later in the plot to kill Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, there's a lot more to it because the fountain case is a big deal, but that is why Oliver Lee's name comes up. But if you go back to that history with them during that the fountain investigation, I am honestly shocked that Garrett didn't get killed back then. I'm really shocked.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
He really wanted to solve that case. He really wanted to solve that case. I mean, I think he felt really like honored, that Governor Thornton and, and all the other people involved, they asked him, they chose him and they brought him in back from Texas and said, hey, we need you to come back for a murder. But
he wanted it to be just him that solved it. And they really,
right. And that's why the Pinkerton files are a big deal, right? Because there's a whole Pinkerton case. Yeah, we would get lost on this. We'd go forever and forever. But such an interesting case and a terrifying one, especially when you read the details and the pool of blood and how big the pool of blood was that they found. And,
I think to bring it back to the death of Garrett, I think we've examined all these conspiracies and there will always be conspiracies and people will definitely disagree and have their own ideas about who killed Garrett. And that's cool. Just like with the kid. But I really think that where I land is it happened just as unglamorously as it happened with Billy the Kid. And it's straightforward and it is in its own way or in the way of the conspiracy theorist. It is unexciting and, but still highly interesting in my opinion. And I think Wayne Brazel shot him the way Adamson recollects. And we can talk about motives. I think Brazel used an opportunity and knew, he knew he had a good kid. Like the minute he saw, hey, I've got Garrett riled up, I can take him out. But I think too, in another sense, I think it probably surprised Brazel that Garrett was that stupid.
That's a good point. Remember why did you just turn your back to me after you threatened to hurt me or kill me?
Do you remember? I think David Thomas says it in his book, but in some book, some source I read somewhere that he would constantly say to people about it afterwards, like, now, why would he do that? So in a sense, I think it was an instance that even mystified Wayne himself.
That's actually, it's very specific. Olive Boyd, his wife that died, her father, father had some letters that were written, and then there was another family member some years later that had other letters that were written, and that apparently was what John Boyd Sr. said, was that Wayne would say that to him and others.
Do that?
Why did Pat go and do that?
Yeah.
So
but, I mean, I think that's very quick-minded of Wayne. The minute he saw Pat jump down and say, "I'll get you off right now,"
Yep.
he was quick and
climbed out of the buggy and then he climbed out because obviously the way those buggies work and his size, he's going to have to step out first and then reach for the Burgess shotgun that's on the floor.
Yep.
Of the buggy. Yeah.
And
perfect. So, I mean, granted, we covered a lot of details. I really hope that everyone is able to absorb. I know everyone's got a different memory bank and how it works, but of course, you'll turn around after these 3 episodes and next thing you know, you'll see a reel on YouTube that says that Jim Killer Miller is the one who absolutely positively killed him. You'll probably never not hear it. It'll, the print road theories, anything other than truth. It'll always be that Garrett was shot in the back of the head while urinating. And it's because so many people can't stand him and despise him so much that gives them joy because you hear it all the time, right? Karma.
Yeah.
Garrett got his karma.
He was a coward.
Yeah. And that's what happened, right? You get shot in the back of the head while you're trying to take a leak because you killed your best friend in the dark. Give me a break. But, and one last thing. I don't have this in my notes, and I don't know why I don't, but you and I both know this. A lot of people know this. Another lasting insult to Pat Garrett. Pat Garrett's final check. Remember?
Yes.
On his persons, when they brought him into Las Cruces, he had a check for $50 from Governor George Curry.
Yep.
And Curry said in his memoir and in interviews later in life that I was just lucky that Pat hadn't had a chance to cash my check yet.
Unbelievable.
That guy's a piece of shit. Dude, the more and more you dig into the, and just the stuff he is, I'm not saying that that Curry was this big corrupt politician that was, because on the contrary, apparently he was nothing of the sort. But in this Pat Garrett situation and the co-signing of the loan and how he did that to him,
horrible.
And then the part that George plays in, helping Garrett's death get finalized without any conspiracy theories. He was writing letters to the papers too. Here's because his name was included in conspiracy theories too. So he had to go out and write to the public, like, here's what I know of the case. I don't know anything other than what's been told to me by Adamson, who, Curry was there for their preliminary examination. So, but finding that last check on his body, that is crazy. That even in the last moments of his life, the guy that put him in the financial situation was nice enough to give him $50.
Yeah. That's wild, man.
Well, I would say that ends our series of No Casket long enough.
And now we'll spend this week wondering what we're going to talk about next week.
Yeah, I have no idea, man. The Garrett information really fills you up to the eyeballs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's a lot of digging, a lot of conspiracy theories that you kind of have to dig through and go back and But what's interesting, when we pointed that out though, is how quick the conspiracy theory started with Garrett.
Yeah,
that was very quick.
The day of,
yeah, like the day before his funeral, which was only 3 days after. Someone sends the first conspiracy letter. And there was also some newspaper articles. I'm sure you came across one. There was one that first week of March, and the headline was Garrett's friends suspect conspiracy. That was the headline. So, and I think it was because of the whole quote unquote urinating thing, right? I think that was why a lot of people were like, Pat wouldn't have been caught doing that. Why would Pat turn his back to someone after threatening, So a lot of people were starting to question, how does Pat Garrett get killed this way?
Yeah.
Right. Well, because there's a theory. But I understand when he's shot in the back of the head and the autopsy does say that, and that bullet's never found. There's so many details that, build this up into something that it's not. And while you got to admit, the conspiracies are a little outlandish, but they're interesting. If all that financial information wasn't available about Garrett's ranches and W.W. Cox, dude, those theories would probably have a lot more ground. You know what I mean? Yeah, they would.
It's the conspiracies that keep our wheels turning, in between the books we read and in between the discussions we have. And I understand how well conspiracies, keep you interested in a subject, but you got to acknowledge sometimes that they don't hold water.
Yeah. Might be interesting, sure,
Yeah.
But well, it's also too when you're as heavily involved and as much as we have our passion for this history, there are times again where I wish I could just read something on the surface and just believe it automatically and be like, nope, no need to dig that. You just know that's true. But unfortunately it's like everything really needs to be examined and scrutinized and checked out and solidified or, debunked. But like I said, we know that it won't really solve anything. People will definitely always put their stock and faith in the conspiracy theories. And I understand. We've talked about that. It's about belief. It's about, I don't want Billy the Kid to die in a dark bedroom.
Yeah.
He was this, he was that. How is he going to die this way? I don't like it. So I don't like it. That didn't happen because Pat Garrett's a liar. I think it's that easy that it starts because that's the question, right? Why? How would Billy fall for this? I've read that so many times. Why? I don't understand. That's not believable.
It is
because
believable.
Billy was, he was already put out there on this massive legend pedestal that you couldn't top, right?
Yeah.
And you couldn't pull him off of it because if you start to pull him off that legend status and you have to look at the facts, you just might find out things aren't the way they are in Young Guns 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing just popped in my head. We all know the ending of Young Guns 2, where William Peterson spins around, points the gun, the screen freezes, and it says, Pat Garrett was killed in 1908, shot to death by a 21-year-old man. Wayne Brazel was 31 years, 1 month, and 29 days when he shot Pat Garrett. Thanks, John Fusco. And you know what? That information was well available at that time when he made Young Guns 2. So why do you think he would change it? Even though he doesn't mention who kills him, he said he's killed by a 21-year-old man. Gee, what do you think the coincidence is of him mentioning that Pat Garrett was supposedly killed by a 21-year-old man because Billy was 21 years old when he killed him? That just, again, another detail that why do you have to get the guy's age wrong? Right? There's a reason why he made it, why they stated he was shot to death by a 21-year-old man. Why did they say that? He wasn't 21 years old.
Poetic theater.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, this has been almost a 2-hour episode.
Yeah. This is
that might be the longest we've ever gone.
Yeah.
But
we did it with 3 episodes of Pat Garrett.
The last time we did that was John Swain.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was another one too, man. That was really worth it because we had to cover all the Jesse Evans stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, we're not sure what we're going to come back with next week. We'll figure that out as the weekend rolls around. But we hope everyone enjoyed the 3 episodes on the death of Pat Garrett.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's a slog here and there, but I think we covered it all. And I think anybody who's interested in this subject can come back to these 3 episodes anytime they want and get a comprehensive view of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And back in episode 1, 2, 3, we've named all kinds of sources, newspaper articles, David G. Thomas's book, Leon C. Metz's book it's a great book. It's got great photos too. It's got photos of Pat Garrett's brothers, which you don't ever see.
Right.
So I like Metz's book. Plus, Metz's book, still to this day, other than Mark Lee Gardner's, Metz just covers it a little bit more in depth, I think, is Pat's early life, right? Leading up to leaving the Louisiana parish, and taking off at 18 years old and going and living his life. And, there's not a lot of books that cover that early life. I think it's just Mark Lee Gardner's book, To Hell on a Fast Horse, the kind of dual biography, and Metz's book until David came out with his book. But David's book, for those who already have it, you know how David puts things. He's literally just putting the documentation and the newspaper articles, and then, he just basically dumps all that on you so you would absorb it. And then he goes, now here's the ridiculous theories and here's why they don't work. That's what I love about David is he doesn't leave any stone unturned. And he's been one of my favorite historians for the last 4 or 5 years. I really love his books.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like James said, if anyone ever has any questions about these 3 episodes or any of the episodes we've previously done, the legally binding documentation on the death of Billy the Kid, the John Swain episodes, the Jesse James, any of those ones we've done, anybody has any questions after you, like if you go back and you watch them and you're like, oh, I'm really curious about this. Yeah, you're more than welcome to reach out to one of us on Forever West and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Have our people contact your people, but
yeah, absolutely. All right.
Until next Thursday.
Celebrate all good, James.
Celebrate all good, Doss. And
we'll see you next week.
There. See ya.